This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
As we travel through life, we often encounter things that we just weren't prepared for. There really is no instruction manual that prepares us for some of the things that we encounter. Our guest this week is a woman that we met a couple of years ago, Sharon and me, on our tour of Israel. God bless her. She and her husband had a less than optimal experience that first year, but they came back the second year and had a much better time. But since we've come to know her, she has become a published author, set up her own publishing company, and is now publishing the works of other authors. But her most recent book is one that hits close to home for me and perhaps for you as well. And that's why I wanted to bring her onto the program. Take a break from cryptic, arcane Mesopotamian theological texts and deal with the here and now, and especially family relationships. From the back cover of her new book, and I'm quoting now, "I looked at this man whom I had loved, admired, and indeed feared all of my life, and I felt such pain and grief for him. He couldn't fathom in his addled mind that this was going to be his new life now. Thoughts of guilt, regret, pain, all wrapped up into this moment. And I had to be the one to tell him, this is your new home now, Dad." The book is My Way, A Daughter's Journey into the World of Dementia. And it is my honor to welcome to the program Sandi Wilson. Sandi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
We're connecting via Skype from, we're here in the Missouri Ozarks. You are in New Zealand, and your weather just a little bit warmer this time of year than we are here, I gather.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Your book, My Way, as I said, it hits close to home to me. My mother is in the early stages of dementia, and just over a year ago, I had to have that conversation with her. She had her situation was exacerbated by the fact that she was no longer taking her meds on a regular schedule, and she does not have a functioning thyroid gland, has not had since 1966. So without that thyroid replacement, her thinking was becoming muddled. She's in a much better place now, and praise God for the community where she's living and the nursing staff there. But that day was a difficult day. Your book is a collection of, is it fair to say, a collection of short essays based on like snapshot scenes of this journey that you've been on?
Yeah, they were a series of blogs I never ever thought that I would write. And believe it or not, it was my former stepmother who said to me, "You need to write about this." And so I started a blog, and it just went from there. I used to publish it on Facebook, but then I went off Facebook for many years. And so I just kept putting them on there and never expected anything to come of it until one day I went into where my dad is now living and was chatting to the receptionist and just said to her, that writing has been one of my ways of dealing with this. And she said, "Please, can you publish what you've written?" And I said, okay. And I had been approached by another friend anyway who wanted me to start a publishing company, and I thought she was slightly mad. But I thought, hey, let's see if I can pull this together and do it. And I did. And I didn't tell anyone, but it grew wings, and and here we are. That's how it started. Yeah.
What was the first indication to you that something was changing with your father?
He rang me from his flat, which was about 45 to 50 minutes away, south of us. And he said, "My landlady is kicking me out." And I said, "That's strange." what he didn't tell me is that his landlord was about to sell the house, and so she needed him to vacate the property.
Oh.
But she'd given plenty of time, as the law requires. So I went down there, but it's when I walked into his home, I was quite shocked because Dad had always been very meticulous, always. And what I saw was not a healthy situation that he was living in. So I started to do a little bit of research myself, and then his doctor at the time would ring me and say a number of things, which, because he's from another country, I couldn't quite understand, and I think part of me didn't want to understand at that time. Yeah. So it went back a number of years, and obviously it got exacerbated, and we really started to see it when he moved 10 minutes away from us up here. Oh boy, did we see that he was in full-blown dementia. Yeah.
Mm. Now, do you have siblings that are that?
I do.
Okay, so do you collaborate with them and kind of share notes back and forth as far as? I don't want to put you in kind of an awkward family situation here by revealing anything you don't want to reveal.
Not at all. I have two older brothers. One lives in Wales, so that's not so helpful.
Right.
And yet he's the trained nurse, so that would have been fantastic. And then I have our middle brother who lives about an hour away, and he's super, super busy, and he does what he can. It's that simple. We talk a lot, and if there's any big decisions, like if there's any meetings that we need to go to, he certainly tries to be there, and I really appreciate that. But to be honest, this is the one thing that people are scared of talking about, is that when there are siblings involved, the parent who is unwell will actually try and turn them against each other at some point. And that has Dad tried to make that happen, but I think we're all just as stubborn as him, so it didn't happen. Yeah.
Now,
definitely.
Now, before his retirement, what was your father's occupation?
Oh my. Okay, so my father has been a professional musician all of my life.
Wow.
And he still sings so beautifully, and he was a jazz musician. Frank Sinatra was his idol.
Wow.
Yes, so every time I take my dad out, we have to sing Frank Sinatra. And that's the beautiful thing, is that he still, he can not have a conversation, but he sure can remember those words of the songs. Something about using both sides of the brain, which is wonderful. So he was a professional musician, but he also wanted to become a farmer. So, a lot of my childhood was on a farm. And he also decided that he wanted to open a home brew shop and a restaurant. Mm-hmm. Dad got to, and he also was a private pilot. So, I've grown up in and out of these little planes, and I thought that was normal. I love planes. Yeah. So I thought that was all very normal. And I was raised in and out of TV and recording studios. And again, I thought that was normal. Yeah. So
very creative, not afraid of taking risks.
Yeah. And yet, and I've just been looking at my manuscript here, very filled with anxiety, had horrible stage fright. Right the way through. And it cost him jobs as well. Yeah. So something hidden there, that you don't realise, because this is my dad. He can do anything. Mm-hmm. It's not until he got older that I realised, what he actually had been plagued with all of his life.
When things became obvious, when it became obvious that he was not good living on his own, what was that conversation like for you? The conversation that you excerpt on the back cover of the book, when you had that that discussion and say, Dad, no, this this is where you're going to live from now on?
Well, there was a conversation before that was absolutely horrendous, and that was when, in order for Dad to get the right kind of help, over here you have to go through the mental health for the elderly, and they have to be sectioned, and that is where some hospital workers will come out and create a plan with you. What they didn't tell me was that they wanted to take him that day, and I was just mortified. Neil was with me. My sister-in-law was at the initial meeting, but she couldn't be with us when we went round to talk to Dad. But that there was the worst day of my life, hands down, because he didn't want to go anywhere. Of course he didn't want to go anywhere. This was foreign territory. These were strange people in his home. But he had to go. He was a danger to himself. And when he was yelling at me, this is all your fault, and, all sorts of stuff. And I watched this emaciated, skinny little man get into the car and drive off, and I collapsed. And, about 5 days after that, I sort of came to and sort of, got back onto it, because you have to. But that conversation with Dad where, I sort of said, okay, well, this is going to be your home. He cried, of course. He cried. We cried. And, but the staff was so fantastic. He just, right from the get-go, he's always had one or two staff members who just utterly adore him. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long for him to settle in. So I was grateful for that.
What advice would you have for people who have not yet had that conversation, but who think that this may be in their future? I mean, I can relate to that conversation. It was that sort of that thing where I had to spring it on my mother. There just was no good way to do it otherwise. But what would you recommend or suggest for people who are facing that conversation?
Well, I think in hindsight, I would have started a little sooner with Dad. I would have made suggestions. I would have said things like, have you thought of, or I see you're struggling with this, But, yeah, obviously with Dad, you couldn't do it in a confrontational way. He would just tell you to get stuffed. That was his MO. That's helpful. So I think, when you just, just drop little hints here and there, but at the end of it, you just have to bite the bullet and say it and say, this is what is going to have to happen. They're going to fight. They're going to cry. They're going to scream. They may throw things, they may do any number of things, but it has to be done. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what it comes down to.
Jump in.
That's what it comes down to. That when you look at a parent who is no longer capable of making healthy decisions regarding meals, medical attention, bill paying.
Yes.
You describe in one chapter of your book, the second chapter, a phone call where your father surprised you with a phone call to let you know that he didn't have his car anymore because it had been impounded by the police. What was that day like for you?
Well, I remember it so clearly. It happened at 5 p.m. We had guests over for dinner, little kids running around everywhere. And I put two and two together. When I first heard him, I just knew this was not going to be a good conversation. But to hear him say, yes, I've been arrested, was, hang on, my dad? My dad? No way, that can't be happening. And unfortunately, the whole scenario in this day and age of social media. Thank God it never got on social media, but it was filmed. And so Dad's version was very different to what actually happened. But he still was quite wounded. As I go into the book, he did need stitches. And I've still got the photos. I really should get rid of them, of what he looked like when he opened the door. But he was very morose, like on the phone. Like he knew he shouldn't have done certain things, but he couldn't understand why his car had to go. And from that day on, his driving license was revoked. And that just opened up a whole world of, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do here. So one phone call after another.
How difficult has it been adjusting to the realization that rational arguments really don't work anymore with your parent?
When it comes to Dad, who was such an intelligent man, very difficult. And it took me a while to figure out that this is not my dad speaking, really. This is the dementia. This is the fact that, he has parts of his brain which are actually brain dead. He cannot form simple thoughts like we can. It took me a while to come to terms with that. Once I did, I realized that there was this giant switch that had happened, and that was I was no longer the child. I was the parent, and he was the child. And that was very, weird to walk into, but I needed to understand that in order to move forward. Still honor him as my dad. I love him so dearly, but I'm the parent now. Yeah.
How difficult has that been for him to adjust to, or how do you negotiate the visits now so that you don't make it seem as though you're telling him what to do, that you are the parent and that that the roles have been reversed? Yeah.
You have to learn to let him lead to a certain degree. Like, when we get there, obviously it's so different now. We have to wear masks and undergo this whole process. And so at first when he sees me with a mask on, he's like, who's this? And then once he realizes it's me, it's like he comes to life. And you let them lead you a bit, And I think because they need to have some sense of dignity themselves as much as you can. And you just steer them, I try not to say, Dad, stop doing this, or Dad, don't do it, unless he gets really silly. Just steer them and let it be as natural as possible. Because that can happen, that will come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The music and the memories of the music that he loved. I found that with my mother, not necessarily music, but old memories, good memories, even if it means listening to the same story that I've heard at least 17 times already. Yes. About her being chased through a field by a bull because she'd gone through the barbed wire fence to pick some flowers. She loves to tell stories. Yes. And for her, she seems to remember things that happened 60, 70 years ago more clearly than things that happened 2 months ago.
That's true.
Do you use memories in addition to music in order to...
Yes. In fact, using photographs is a really good thing to really jolt their memory, especially if they're photographs of them when they're a lot younger. Mm-hmm. This is what I clicked onto. There was a picture of Dad with his two sisters back in the 70s, when they all had long hair. He went from a tuxedo to, the paisley shirt. And he got it. he knew that that was him. He knew that that was his sisters. But when I showed him pictures of, 5 years ago or even a couple of months ago, he'd go, "Who's that old man?" And I'm like, "That's you." "No, it's not." "Okay, Dad." So using photos has been really good. And you're talking about things that make him happy, and so obviously, my dad had a wonderful childhood, had wonderful parents, and there were a lot of antics that they all got up to, like in a good way. And so, we talk about that sort of stuff as much as I'm able to remember the stories that I have heard, because he doesn't really recognise his grandchildren. He doesn't remember that he's been married. He can't put me in the place of where I'm supposed to be, So I think talking about memories and showing photos and singing songs has been our saving grace, actually. Yeah.
So how has his relationship with you changed now since he's been living in this facility and getting regular care? How have things changed?
Well, at first he was, can I dare say, feral. He hated me. And I understood that. So I took a couple of weeks. To get my own mind sorted so that I could sort of go back into the fray, as it were, and be a blessing rather than, make it all about me. When he forgot my name, that hurt so much. That's when I rallied against this disease and I hate this, because he gave me my name and he sang over me when I was born, albeit a Frank Sinatra song, but still.
I did that with my daughter, but I made her listen to barbershop quartet, so it's Sinatra is probably a classier choice.
And you have to deal with that in private. You have to grieve in private. You've got to keep all of that and take that home and deal with it and pray and, leave all that there so that when you come back, you can be whatever they need you to be. And once Dad actually was put on a different medication, the nice Dad came back. So that was really interesting. So a lot of this is hit and miss, and you can't blame the medical professionals. Every person is different, so they may put a whole bunch of people on one lot of medication and a couple of people are not going to react very well, and my dad was one of those people. But I went marching in there and I said, "You change his meds, otherwise I'm not coming back." And they did, and it worked. Praise God.
Well, and that's a bit of good advice, actually. My sister-in-law has worked in Alzheimer's care units in several states, and she's got a lot of experience with patients and loves her patients. It takes a special kind of person, to do what Debbie does. And so, God bless her and the nurses like her at facilities that care for people who are going through this final stage of life where they're sending their memories on to heaven ahead of them. But she said it's the patients whose families care enough to visit regularly who get the best care. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be they should all get the same amount of care. But psychologically, they know that if, Derek is seeing his mother once a week, Sandy's coming in to see your father at least once a week, they're going to make sure that there's nothing there for you to complain about. And no reason to either call a state inspector or to move to another facility. And so that's just something to remember. You've got to push yourself to go back into that situation, if only because they know, the staff knows, that they have to take extra care of Mr. Wilson because Sandy's coming back and she gets really mad.
It is sort of like that. Actually, it's no one's actually explained it to me like that before. And part part of that situation, for us being in lockdown, I mean, as you know, we've just come out of 107 days of lockdown. And my first thought when we go into lockdown is, I used to be a homeschooling parent. So homeschooling Sammy is not a big deal. And, Neil and I, we love being together. So that's not a big deal. My big deal was, what about my dad? How's he going to be? Well, it turns out he loves Skype. And every time I saw him, he was feeding his face, and he recognized me straight away, and it was good, and I was able to get him singing via Skype, and just chatting away, and he was seeing his grandchildren in the back and going, who are they and what are they doing? And he recognizes Neil. He loves Neil. So I think it's so important, as much as you don't want to. And I'm telling you, there were times I did not want to go and see my dad. I rallied against it, but I made myself week after week. And I'm so glad that I did, because even in his adult state, there is such beauty and joy still there. There really is. So I actually get quite a bit out of it.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's something in our modern culture. We're seeing this growing belief that death is an acceptable treatment for suffering of any kind. And that in Europe, there are people who are now signing up, and I don't have the story in front of me, and I forget which nation it is, so I don't want to speak incorrectly here, give out incorrect facts, but there is a growing movement for people to sign a decree, and this is not here in the United States yet, not New Zealand or Australia, but it is in at least a couple places in Europe, where they will authorize a doctor, upon a doctor's diagnosis of dementia, to essentially trigger an implanted basically suicide pill. Now, again, I don't want to sensationalize this, because I may be misremembering facts, but the point is that we're getting to a point in Western civilization where it's okay where it's believed to be okay to just terminate the elderly when they pass when they lose a certain amount of cognition, because, well, that's not an acceptable quality of life. There's no dignity in living that way. I think really what it is selfish, because it becomes more work for us, the younger, to take care of them. And yet you see, and you record some really touching interactions in your book, My Way, and I've seen it in the interactions with my mother, where even though they're not who they used to be, there's still a dignity and value in that life.
Oh, absolutely. And, my father, I don't know why he would say this, and I used to pray against it, was, I'm not going to make 80. And I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, you are. In fact, what we did is we brought out my brother and my nephews, and for the first time ever, all of us kids and all of the grandkids were in the same room as my parents, first time ever. And then we did that on Dad's 80th. It was just awesome. And it was me saying, you're still here. And there's a reason you're still here. And I think, we've had a lot of policy changes over here in New Zealand. The euthanasia, has gone through, and it's now in action. And, so what you're talking about is slightly different, but it makes my blood boil, because God is the author of life. Our Creator is the one who decides when it's time to go home. And I will not change from that. That's it. It's set in stone for me. We don't get to choose when we go. So in the meantime, we have a job. We have a job, and that is to bring joy. That is to bring the goodness of God and his healing, his love, his light into these situations. And that is what I choose to do. I have to crucify my flesh quite often But that is what I choose to do because that is my dad. And I love him. It's that simple. It's that simple.
You've got a chapter here, chapter 6, titled, "Well, Fancy That," which was an expression your father used to describe his reaction to learning that you had become a published author. What did that mean to you?
Everything. Absolutely everything. It meant, I'm 51 now, but at the time I was in my late 40s, and just to finally get that validation, even if Dad has got dementia, just to finally hear, "I'm so proud of you," just meant everything to me. As you'd be able to tell, he can't read. He can't read a book. He has no intention of reading any books, but he wanted it, and he wanted me to write something in it, and he shows it to everybody. It's really sweet, and then he forgets, So yes, it meant everything to me. It really did.
My mom does the same thing with my books. She's not quite sure what it is Sharon and I do or talk about, but she's
I understand.
very, very proud of us, and very proud of the fact that I've credited her in my in the acknowledgments in a couple of books for teaching me to love to read and learn. And she's also very happy to share with people that, yes, Derek started talking at the age of 18 months, and he hasn't stopped. So she does enjoy that. So your father's personality seemed like quite an outgoing, charming man in his younger years. As you described it, he was able to get away with blue murder. How does he use that now with the staff at the home?
Oh my gosh. It's that smile, isn't it? He does. He still has that same smile. He still has a great sense of humor. And he'll do this little jig. He still does this little jig, and he just gets away with it. They all think that he is the best thing since sliced bread. In fact, they call him the manager because they'll go and open windows and curtains in the dining room, and Dad will go and close them all behind them. And he tells them what he's going to do and what he's not going to do. And they just utterly adore him. So, yeah, he's the manager. And he still gets away with it just because he has that kind of personality. Yeah.
How do you explain your father to his grandkids? The fact that they're young, they may not understand that somebody who's in his 80s now won't know them, even though he's been around for their entire lives, and he has somehow lost the memories of them. How do you explain that to kids?
Well, I guess in my case, my three, Stephanie, Juliana, and Sammy, I've named them all now. They've lived through it. And they often would accompany me. So they've seen Dad in all of his hues and his shades, and they just adore him, So, Sammy's 15, and we started this process a number of years ago. Sammy it doesn't really register too much other than this is Papa. This is just Papa. And Sammy now loves Frank Sinatra. Oh, dear.
Oh, wow.
So there is that. But my girls who are in their 20s, they fully understand. So they were, in their late teens, early 20s when this all started. So they just came on the journey with us as often as they could. They would physically come down, and they've both got great senses of humor as well. So that helps immensely.
Well, coming from you and Neil, I can see how that's possible. Yeah. We've gotten to know them a bit from the 2 tours of Israel. Yes.
Yes. I would apologize, but I'm not going to.
No need. The need to kind of redirect and guide conversations when things get a little awkward, a little difficult. This is something that a lot of folks who are dealing with a parent in dementia have to wrestle with, as things that make sense to them really aren't rational to the rest of us. Behavior that seems inexplicable. Why would you even do that, Mom? Make perfect sense to her. And you described some of this in the case of your father. How do you redirect and work through issues like your father just bundling up his dirty clothes and tossing them in the bathroom bin instead of, the logical thing, which would be, setting him out for the laundry service or doing the laundry? How do you gently redirect when things just aren't making sense?
And I think it took me a long time to figure that. Well, in that instance, with the laundry, I'm not there all the time, so I don't have to deal with it as much. What they have done is they literally hide all of Dad's clothing. They have to put it into a locked cupboard. And so every day, at shower time, they give him his allocated clothing, and that's it. So if he throws things away, he's running around in his undergarments.
Yeah.
But so, for instance, we had a situation where I came to pick him up, and bless his heart, he wouldn't put on his belt. And, he's skinny. He needed to put on his belt because I said to him, your pants will fall down in front of people, and I don't think that you're like that. Well, he turned around and said to me, well, I don't care. Oh, what am I going to do? And we had a situation, and Sammy was with us too, and Dad got very aggressive. But he managed to calm down. What I ended up having to do is hold his hands and look him in the eye and just say, Dad, I love you. Everything's okay. Let them do what needs to be done, and then we can go and get food. You mentioned food, and he's off. So it's finding the things that your loved ones really like, really care about. In Dad's instance, coffee, food, and going for a drive, and using that to navigate your way, if that makes sense.
Rather than trying to argue the point and say, hey, look, this doesn't make sense.
You can't.
Yeah.
God bless you, try, but you can't. And it doesn't work. And you get frustrated, and then they get frustrated, and it's just a nightmare. So you have to learn to, look, Derek, you got to turn a lot of things into a joke. You've got to, sometimes when they're telling you a story and it's just utter rubbish, just join in the story. You have to develop an imagination. That's really important.
Yeah. Always have a backup plan. If the conversation starts to go south, let's talk about Aunt Eileen and the mean trick that Mom pulled on her, or whatever. Just redirect. And I think most important is just to remember that it's not their fault. It's not their fault. There's a lot of emotion that comes through in your book. And that's, again, why I wanted to give you this opportunity to share a little bit about this, because I think a lot of folks, myself included, going through this, everybody knows somebody in the family who has had to wrestle with this and deal with this. And most of us just aren't prepared, as I said at the opening, just aren't prepared for this. There's no instruction manual that teaches you how to suddenly take responsibility for an aging parent who is no longer doing well, living on their own. If you had one thing that you hope that readers of your book, My Way, would take away from the book, what would that be?
I think I've written it at the very end. You need to look for it sometimes, but there are moments of joy, and you have to savor that. You're going to get thrown a lot on this journey, but at the end of the day, especially for those of us who are believers, there is great, great joy. Yeah, that's always my go-to. There is joy there. Look for it. It'll present itself. Yeah.
I've been blessed by the support of my wife, Sharon. Has just been amazing and understanding through all of this. How has Neil dealt with all of this?
Oh, he is a rock star. He is an absolute rock star. He has been, from the get-go, because we were quite newly married too when this all sort of happened upon us. He just jumped straight in. It's very difficult to offend my husband. Very difficult. And that sense of humour has been a godsend. And having someone who will stand with me in prayer, who will stand by my side no matter what, and face all of these battles with me has been, I couldn't have done it without him. I just couldn't have. And I take my hat off to him. He is an amazing man. He's an amazing man of God. He's an amazing dad. He's an amazing son-in-law. He is just, I'm sorry, but he is my rock star. Yeah.
This is, I think, what God intended when he designed the family unit and intended for us to love and support one another right through the end. Because in a fallen world, we're not going to have an easy journey along the way. Our Lord and Savior warned us we would endure tribulation, but as Paul wrote, the glory that is to come will make the tribulation that we suffer in this world as nothing. And so, storing up crowns in heaven, Sandi Wilson, that is what you are doing. The book is My Way, A Daughter's Journey into the World of Dementia. Where do people get a copy?
Well, we're on Book Depository, we're on Amazon and all of those normal sort of online stores. But if you want to, you can go to sandysparklewilson.com. You can purchase it there from the store. It's just all over the place.
And there will be links in the notes wherever you're watching or listening to this. So check the description below, and you'll find a link there to Sandi Wilson's website, sandysparklewilson.com. What's the sparkle? I've always wondered.
Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of cute. Neil calls me Sparkle. Because he thinks I'm sparkly.
Well, why not? Why not?
So I figured in honor of him, that would be it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be a link to that website, and where you can also find it at Book Depository and at Amazon as well. The book, again, My Way, A Daughter's Journey into the World of Dementia. One final question, Sandi. How difficult was it opening it up and sharing some of these rather personal details and interactions between you and your father as he began to decline?
It was actually quite easy. My difficulty was family members,
right,
elderly members who may have found it to be, not the done thing. But I've always marched to my own beat, much like my father. So writing, I will continue to do. I continue to blog about it. There's more blogs on my website. But actually, it was quite easy. It was quite easy for me, yeah.
All right. Again, My Way, A Daughter's Journey into the World of Dementia. Sandi, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you and Neil again in person one of these days.
You certainly will. You certainly will be. We may just have to come to the States,
Well, we pray that 2022 or at some point here in the near future that things open up and that's possible again sooner rather than later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciate it.
Check the show notes wherever you're watching or listening to this program, and you'll find links to Sandi Wilson's website, also a link to her book, My Way. If this is a subject that touches you, is something that has affected you or your family, the book, My Way, will be a blessing to you. Coming up, a couple of conferences to tell you about. Hear the Watchman. The virtual conference has been backed up. It now begins January 15th. Talk about that. Also tell you how to save $20 on the conference coming to Dallas in March, and also how you can read a big chunk of my new book, The Second Coming of Saturn, for free. That's ahead as A View from the Bunker continues. Talking the walk from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker, VFTB.net. I am Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at the aforementioned website, which is what we call our global hub for this multimedia enterprise. You'll also find us on social media at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert, both of those on Twitter, Facebook, View from the Bunker, and all the new social media sites, Gab, MeWe, Getter, Parler, at Derek P. Gilbert, Derek P. Gilbert at each one of those. You might have noticed, if you checked out last week's podcast episode with Sheila Zielinski on her book Technogeddon on YouTube, that interview is no longer there. I don't even remember what we said, but we actually mentioned the V word, and apparently that was not acceptable to the algorithm at Alphabet, and so that was yanked, even though it was audio only. And again, I don't recall us saying anything too outrageous, but regardless, that's why that program has disappeared. Now, you can still find the audio program at the usual site, VFTB.net, or Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, the usual places. It's still there, but the audio version that gets fed by Spreaker over to YouTube, yanked. And one more, and we get a strike on this channel. So the good news is that the way Omicron has been developing, it appears that if cooler heads prevail, if science is followed instead of the science trademark, this pandemic should be on its last legs. Scientists, researchers at Washington University and St. Louis have now found the mechanism that explains, they think, why Omicron is less deadly than previous variants of the virus. It is much more efficient at affecting the upper respiratory system than the deep lung tissue, which means it essentially becomes a cold, more or less. They infected hamsters and mice, and along with the Omicron and with other variants to see how they compared, and found that that's exactly what happened. Upper respiratory system infected, lung tissue not so much with Omicron. What surprised the researchers was that the mice and hamsters maintained or nearly maintained body weight, those infected with Omicron. Those who were infected with Delta and Lambda and the other variants lost a lot of body weight, which suggested they were fighting a much more severe infection. So that's good news, as the percentage of cases here in the United States attributed to the Omicron variant is now the majority. I heard today somewhere, I haven't confirmed it, but I heard as of this recording, it was upwards of 90% of the COVID cases in the United States now attributed to Omicron. So praise God, we may see some light at the end of this tunnel yet. And to that end, we are looking forward to getting back to some actual conferences. Now, first off, I want to talk about the Remnant Revolution virtual conference from Hear the Watchman that was scheduled to launch January 1st. Now, if you signed up for that, you know, of course, by now that did not happen. There was some illness in the Kerr family, Mike Kerr, dealing with some sickness, his son and their family also dealing with some illness. And so the back-end technical issues, there just wasn't anybody to handle it. So they have backed up the launch date for the Remnant Revolution virtual conference to January 15th. The good news is you'll still get 6 months access to the conference from the 15th, from the start date. So still time to get in on this, and you haven't missed a day. So even though you're hearing this on January 9th or later, you haven't missed anything yet. A virtual conference featuring Jamie Walden, Dr. Michael Lake, Michael Boldea, Pastor Paul Begley, Josh Peck, Dr. Mike Spalding, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, and Tom Dunn. A dynamic lineup. And my contribution is a 1-hour selection of essentially teachings, segments pulled from my book, The Second Coming of Saturn, information I've not presented in public before. So it's brand new information, hearthewatchman.com, and they're knocking $20 off the registration, regularly $79 when you sign up now. Just went to the website. It's $59, hearthewatchman.com for the virtual conference launching January 15th now. Now, Hear the Watchman coming to Dallas, March 18th through 20th. And we're glad that we're going back. That was the last real conference, really, before the whole conference schedule, the conference seasons were sort of derailed by COVID. 2 years ago, we left Dallas, and it was like the week after that travel basically got shut down. But we're coming back to the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center in Grapevine, Texas, March 18th through 20th. Dr. Michael Lake, Jamie Walden, Michael Boldea, Pastor Paul Begley, Dr. Mike Spalding will be there for that. This is the Eyes to See conference. Other speakers to be announced yet, and we can save you $20 on the registration by using the promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20. Sharon and I will be there. I think I'll be doing all the talking. God bless her, Sharon is happy to let me run my mouth, even though she's the one who's the smarter of the two. But unlike her, I do have a psychological need to get up in front of people and show off what I think I know. So God bless you for being patient enough to put up with that. Anyway, we hope we see you in Dallas. The Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center is a great facility. We've enjoyed it every time we've been there. March 18th through 20th of 2022. And remember the promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20 to save $20. The early first weekend in March, if you're in the Ozarks, if you're in the Springfield, Missouri area, Branson, Missouri area, there's a weekend retreat that Sharon and I are calling the Return of Saturn and the Great Reset. This is March 4th through 7th, and it's hosted by His Call Ministries at their place, the Finley River Ranch in Sparta, Missouri. Sparta is between Springfield and Branson, so conveniently located. It's a beautiful facility, but it's cozy. We can fit maybe 75 to 100, and we hope to see you there because it gives us an opportunity to meet and talk with you more than we do at conferences where there's a lot more people and there's more time to sit and talk and share, and it's really wonderful. We've gotten to know Ginny and Alec Wade, the two folks behind His Call Ministries. Joy Stevenson, who organizes for them, a wonderful woman, and we've enjoyed every time we've been there. In fact, now our colleagues from Skywatch TV, Allie Henson and Donna Howell, will be there the first weekend in February for the Warrior Women's Retreat, which is always well attended. So they're really in for something there. The Warrior Women's Retreat this year. We were there last year for that. But Allie and Donna, boy, they are a dynamic team. So the first weekend in February, Allie Henson, Donna Howell at the Finley River Ranch for His Call Ministries. And then Sharon and I will be there the first weekend in March 4th through 7th. You can find out more online at their website, hiscallministries.com, hiscallministries.com. Now, mentioned getting free access to my book, The Second Coming of Saturn. Tom Horn has, over the past few years, developed a pattern of just releasing chapter-length excerpts from books that he publishes. Tom is the CEO of Defender Publishing. So when we put out a new book, very often Tom will release big chunks of it to the internet. The skeptics out there who say that what's the word they use? Grifters? They don't pay attention to that. But the fact is that most of Zeitgeist 2025, Tom's last book, most of Shadowlands, with The Great Delusion, which was a DVD, Tom went back and released a big chunk of the book that Josh Peck and I wrote in 2017 on the UFO phenomenon, The Day the Earth Stands Still, and parted that out in chapter-length excerpts. So we're in the middle of doing that right now with The Second Coming of Saturn. As of this recording, I think we're up to part 17 or 18, I want to say. That's about halfway through. And by the time we get done with this in mid-February, most of the book will be out on the internet now. You can see it at skywatchtv.com. You can also find it at my website, derekpgilbert.com. There's a link in a menu bar there that says Second Coming of Saturn. All of those chapter-length excerpts are there, and it's just a way to introduce you to the material. because, frankly, it's this is the deep end of the pool. Not to pat myself on the back, but Sharon and I have spent the last 6 years with our heads basically buried in academic papers about ancient Roman, Greek, Canaanite, Amorite, Babylonian, Sumerian cosmology. And that's what's coming out in these books. Now, we mix it with some speculation and whatnot. We try to identify it as such, but not everybody wants to dive into a 300-page book with 550 footnotes. So you can do it for free. Try before you buy. DerekPGilbert.com. Look for the link in the menu bar that says Second Coming of Saturn. And again, by February, we'll probably have about 75-80% of the book published online. It is available now, by the way, in paperback and Kindle at Amazon. And God bless you and thank you. It has been the number one new release in the Christian commentaries category for weeks. I'm not sure why it's categorized as Christian commentaries. I'd call it more of a prophecy-related book, but whatever. I'm just thankful that many of you are interested in it. So I find the subject matter fascinating, but I'm a nerd. And so a lot of what I find fascinating is just really, really boring to a lot of other people. So Second Coming of Saturn, available now, Amazon.com, but also at SkywatchTVStore.com. If you want the paperback, SkywatchTVStore.com is the place to go. Skywatch TV and then Whispering Ponies Ranch, by extension, benefits more when you buy directly from Skywatch TV. And coming in February, I've got to work on architecting this tonight, DVD of teachings that introduce the material in the book. It'll be a series of 13 teachings. 13, not because I like the number, but just because that's 1/4 of a year. So thinking if somebody ever wanted to use this as a Bible study or a Sunday school class, 1/4 of the year, 20-minute video introducing several chapters at a time, and boom, there you go, discuss. Anyway, that'll be offered with the book when Skywatch TV airs the programs about the book in February. And so just keep an eye on that. And again, SkywatchTVStore.com to get the book. The Tour of Israel, scheduled for March. The Skywatch TV Tour of Israel, you probably guessed, since we've agreed to do the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas, we will not be going to Israel in March. Still too many questions about what Israel is going to require, not just in terms of vaccine, but in terms of quarantine for people coming in from outside the country. If you're paying to go to Israel for a couple of weeks and you got to spend 5 or 10 days in quarantine when you get there, that's just not workable. So we've moved it back to spring of 2023. We're finalizing the dates with Lipkin Tours, and as soon as that is done, we will let you know, and that will be posted at skywatchinisrael.com. Thank you again for taking time out to watch or listen wherever you consume podcasts, which of course is Spreaker, Stitcher, or Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever else you find us, which is wherever fine podcasts are sold. And please give us a like at Facebook, give us a review wherever you're listening, and remember our announcer, DC Good. Thank you for doing that every week, DC. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House, released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.